You're not imagining the future, you're rehearsing your own abandonment. And the disturbing part is, your brain believes it's helping you. It feels like thinking ahead, like being prepared, like staying one step in control. But there's a reason these scenarios keep looping in your mind. Conversations that haven't happened, failures that don't exist yet, people leaving before they've even had the chance to stay. And that reason isn't intelligence. It isn't intuition. It's something much older, much quieter, and far less honest. There's a reason this keeps happening, and it's not what you think. What you call overthinking is actually your nervous system activating a predictive threat model. In simple terms, your brain is trying to simulate danger before it arrives. This is rooted in what neuroscientists refer to as threat perception circuitry, a system designed to keep you alive, not necessarily to keep you accurate. When this circuitry is hypersensitive, it stops distinguishing between real threats and imagined ones, and suddenly, your future becomes a stage for fear instead of possibility. This is where it begins to distort, because your brain isn't asking what's likely to happen, it's asking what could hurt me, and then it fills in the blanks with whatever past experience left the deepest emotional imprint. This is trauma imprinting. Not always from major events, but from repeated moments where your emotional safety felt uncertain. Rejection, silence, inconsistency. The brain encodes these as patterns, not memories, and then it projects them forward. So when you imagine someone losing interest in you, it's not random. It's recognition, familiarity, a pattern replaying itself through a different face. But here's where it becomes more complex. Your brain doesn't just predict the threat, it also rehearses your reaction to it. This is an avoidance reinforcement loop. You imagine the worst-case scenario, feel the emotional impact in advance, and then subtly adjust your behavior to avoid that imagined outcome. You text differently, you hold back, you detach early, you prepare for loss by creating distance. And that distance feels like control. But it's not control, it's preemptive withdrawal. This is where it turns, because the very mechanism designed to protect you from pain starts to manufacture the conditions that recreate it. You expect disconnection, so you behave in a way that reduces connection. You fear rejection, so you become less open, less expressive, less present. And the other person feels it, not your fear, but your absence. Then, when the connection weakens, your brain says, "See, I was right." It wasn't right. It was self-fulfilling. This pattern is deeply tied to attachment conditioning. If your early experiences taught your nervous system that closeness is unstable or temporary, then your identity adapts around that belief, not consciously, structurally. You become someone who anticipates loss before it happens, someone who scans for subtle shifts in tone, timing, attention, someone who doesn't trust stillness because stillness once meant something was about to change. So your brain fills the silence with scenarios, not because it enjoys it, because it doesn't trust the present. There's a concept introduced by psychologist Daniel Kahneman that explains part of this distortion, the availability heuristic. Your brain estimates the likelihood of something happening based on how easily examples come to mind. If your past is filled with moments of emotional unpredictability, then your brain overestimates how likely those moments are to repeat. So you don't just imagine the future, you recycle it. And here's the metaphor that exposes the mechanism. Your mind is like a security system that was calibrated during a break-in. It learned what danger looked like during a moment of vulnerability. But instead of recalibrating after the threat passed, it stayed locked in that sensitivity. Now, every movement triggers the alarm, even harmless ones, especially harmless ones. So a delayed reply becomes rejection, a neutral tone becomes disinterest, a small shift becomes a signal of loss. The system isn't broken, it's overtrained. And this is the part that challenges how you see yourself. You don't overthink because you're deep, you overthink because you're conditioned. That identity, the one that says, I just think a lot, is a softer version of a harder truth. Your brain has learned that emotional safety is unstable, and now it's trying to control instability by predicting it. But prediction isn't protection, it's exposure. Because every time you run these scenarios, your body reacts as if they're real. Your heart rate shifts, your muscles tighten, your focus narrows. This is nervous system activation, and over time, it becomes your baseline. You live in a constant state of subtle anticipation, where nothing is wrong, but nothing feels safe either. This is where it becomes self-sabotage, because the future you're trying to prepare for starts shaping the present you're living in. You become less spontaneous, less trusting, less available, not because you want to be, but because your system is prioritizing survival over connection. And here's the prediction you won't like. If this pattern continues, you won't just imagine disconnection, you will create it. Not dramatically, not all at once, gradually, quietly, through hesitation, guardedness, and emotional distance that others can feel but not always explain. And then you'll interpret their withdrawal as confirmation. This is the loop, this is the trap, and this is where the shift happens. Because up until now, it felt like your brain was trying to protect you from the future. But it's not. It's trying to protect you from the past. Every scenario you imagine is a disguised memory, not in content, but in emotion. The same uncertainty, the same lack of control, the same quiet fear that something meaningful can disappear without warning. So your brain tries to get ahead of it, but it never catches up. Because the threat it's responding to no longer exists in the same form. This is the part no one warns you about. The more you try to control imagined outcomes, the less present you become in real ones. And presence is the only place where connection actually forms. Not in prediction, not in preparation, in presence. But presence requires something your system doesn't trust yet: uncertainty. And that's the cost. You trade real connection for imagined control. You trade openness for anticipation. You trade possibility for familiarity. Because familiarity, even when it's painful, feels safer than the unknown. So what's actually happening when your brain creates these fake scenarios? It's not forecasting, it's defending. Defending an identity that was built around instability. Defending a nervous system that learned to stay alert. Defending a version of you that equates emotional safety with constant vigilance. And until that changes, the future will keep looking like the past, not because it has to, but because your perception keeps shaping it that way. Now here's the resolution that doesn't feel like relief, but it is. You don't need to stop thinking about the future. You need to recognize when your thinking is memory in disguise. That moment when you catch a scenario forming and realize it's not about what's coming, but about what's already happened, that's where the loop weakens. Not instantly, but structurally. Because awareness interrupts automation. And once the pattern is no longer invisible, it loses part of its authority. The question you were unconsciously holding at the beginning, why does this keep happening, finally has an answer. It happens because your brain is loyal to what it learned, not to what is true. And loyalty doesn't change through force, it changes through recognition. So the next time your mind starts constructing a future that feels heavy, distant, or already lost, don't ask if it's accurate, ask where it came from. Because that answer will always tell you more than the scenario itself. And once you start seeing that pattern clearly, something else begins to shift quietly in the background. Not your thoughts, your relationship to them. And that's where this stops being prediction and starts becoming choice. If you stay here long enough, you'll start noticing how many of your futures were never real to begin with. And that realization doesn't just change how you think, it changes what you're willing to believe next.